what I noticed was that the moment I started to read these books more seriously, my language command really increased exponentially. This is one thing that I noticed. And also that my thinking, it becomes really expanded. It started to expand beyond. Dashi Dele, all of you. It is a great joy for me to be part of this program under the Tibetan Diaspora, headed by Mr. Sonawanti. And I really appreciate his initiative and sense of responsibility to help everyone in his own capacity. And today, he asked me to share my little experience of the importance, the benefit of reading books, and to suggest some titles of the books. If I go back in time, when I was in school, like 30, 35 years ago, I was not really a voracious book reader. I was more like engrossed in my day-to-day, the day-to-day subjects of the school, like mathematics, physics, and so forth. Not really keen on reading books outside on these subjects that I had to study. One thing that I noticed then as a young boy was that in my class there were a few students who were so keen on reading books and who were indeed voracious readers. And one thing that I noticed was that they tend to do better in the other subjects, all related to English, for the reason that the books that they used to read, they were all English books in English. So they do pretty well in the other subjects as well. And looking back in time, I can sense that it was because that their language improved so well that whatever subjects they learn, even the subjects of the respective class that they were to do, they understand the topics, the subjects much better as compared to people like us. And particularly, I remember myself as someone who's just engrossed just with the textbooks and not really outside the textbooks. So this was one of the drawbacks that I noticed of not being used to reading books. Then after my schooling, I joined the Institute of Buddhist Dialectics, and there also again I was just grabbing at only the scriptures, which were related to the philosophy, psychology, logic, and so forth, and again not really outside those scriptures. And of course I used to read one or two books, maybe or some articles here and there, but not as somebody so keen on with the good habit of reading books. This was what was absent with me. And then after about 6 years in the Institute of Buddhist Dialectics, then I moved to Debun Monastery. There again the same thing. I was into the scriptures, particularly precisely those of the subjects which are being studied there, rather than going outside these texts. These are scriptures. So I was even more cocooned into those scriptures and not really outside. So after completing my Geshe degree, I had a very good fortune to have the audience with His Holiness. And to cut short the story, it was with my teacher, Venerable Geshe Wangchen Rinpoche, that I got the audience, and with His Holiness. And somehow from there, what evaporated was that there was the possibility that I'll be involved in doing some translation works. Then I thought, again, as a young man, that my command of the language was so weak. How can I possibly be a part of such an endeavor of translating for His Holiness the Dalai Lama? And then with this a kind of a fear and kind of a new responsibility, I just took this new initiative to start reading books. And and how I did was that I was so keen, just grab one book and read that book as though like reading a textbook, and then marking all the new words, the technical terms, the terminology, and how each of these words are being pronounced. And in those days, all these today's very fancy gadgets, they were all missing, and we really need to get hold of the fat dictionary. So this was what I used to do in those days. And what I noticed was that the moment I started to read these books more seriously, my language command really increased exponentially. This is one thing that I noticed. And also that my thinking, it becomes really expanded. It started to expand beyond what I was studying. And particularly with the books by His Holiness the Dalai Lama, I realized that you'll think of the whole world. It opened up, and it made your thinking very clear, and you can communicate with the whole world very easily. And you can, to some extent, you can also sympathize with the world. Wherever you are, you can sympathize with the world. And then as you read more of the books by His Holiness the Dalai Lama, I noticed that particularly dealing with the people who are more civilized, who are more cultured, dealing with these people, and when communicating, exchanging ideas, they really appreciate particularly ideas which you find in the books of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. So now going back to the main point, what books would I recommend people to read? First, pertaining to the world today, we see that each one of us, we are the citizens of this world. And then we are bound to meet with different people. And now today, with the world of the technology, very sophisticated technology and the internet and so forth, digital world, we see that we will see the world as though like the world is in your palms. So with this, you realize that you can communicate with the world so easily, and that the people can benefit from you a lot if you have the materials which His Holiness provided in His books. And His books are real treasures for the world. So in this connection, the one principle which governs, which His Holiness thinks, and which all the sensible people from different religions and from the experts in the education, they agree to the vision of His Holiness, that the world is deprived of one value, the value to promote your heart, value to value to give a quality to your heart, while the modern education is there primarily, almost fully, to promote, to encourage your brain development, and not at all to develop your heart. So this part is what is lacking in the modern education, given that modern education came into existence in its full blossom at the time of Industrial Revolution. And the Industrial Revolution was the time when the physical might and the material development was just picking up at its peak, and because of which the brain development, how to make the material development so fast, and to be creative about the material development. So this was what is happening, and the modern education really came to its full blossom around that time, because of which it is all about how to develop your brain. That's it. And now the education that we inherited is just a legacy of that past. And unfortunately, that was fully focused on brain development and with least focus on heart development. So His Holiness now comes with the vision, huge vision for the world, that we should think of in inculcating and introducing the programs, curriculums to promote universal ethics in the modern education system. So in this connection, what I would suggest is that just see if we can promote this wherever you are in your own capacity, how to promote this universal ethics, and where do we get the resources. I would suggest 2 books. One is Ethics for the New Millennium, and the other one is Beyond Religion. So these 2 are the 2 best books that I would suggest pertaining to the universal ethics. This is one thing. And the next book that I may talk about a little bit is those people who are more inclined towards modern science. I would suggest the book Universe in a Single Atom. And of course, this book may not be too relevant to people who have least least inclination towards modern science. This book may not be helpful, but for those who have some passion or some strong background in physics, neuroscience, I would highly recommend this book. This is extremely helpful book. Then the next book that I may talk about is about the interfaith, the dialogues. So the one book by His Holiness, which incorporates almost all the religions, is the book entitled Trikenship of Faith, and the preface by Dr. Abdul Kalamji, the former president of America. And I also come across people from business background, from the economics background. For them, I would suggest the book, The Leader's Way, the book which His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Professor Lorenz, 2 of them, they co-authored this book, Leader's Way. Then the other books that I may suggest, particularly pertaining to more related to emotions, how to deal with emotions, how to deal with our depression, stress, and so forth. And we come across nowadays amongst the youngsters, people going through depression, anxiety is exponentially increasing. So I'm sure the viewers, you have your own friends, family members who are going through these difficulties. For that matter, I may suggest the book, The Art of Happiness. This extremely good book, again quoted by His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Professor Howard Cutler. This is a very good book. And alongside, of course, this is one of the bestsellers. And alongside the Art of Happiness, Part 2, Part 3, Part 4, they're all available there. And with respect to healing your emotions, or anger, agitation, so forth, or to heal your stress, and so forth, His Holiness' book by the title Healing Anger. This is a commentary on the chapter 6 of Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life. This is extremely helpful. This is like a guide for us all our life. And another book which would be very lively for us to read, for light reading, and for pure enjoyment, would be the Book of Joy, again quoted between His Holiness the Dalai Lama and another Nobel laureate, Bishop Tutu. And then as Tibetans, for us, His Holiness is like the decoration, like the pride of the Tibetan people, of the past, the present, and the future. And his biography, Freedom in Exile. This is must to read. And we talk about, say, okay, the Tibetans. We see that whenever we go out, particularly amongst the educated people, be it Indians or the Westerners or anybody, educated people, they will just relate to you as Tibetans. And then they will see the image of His Holiness with you. And for sure, discussions will happen about His Holiness and about Tibet. So one thing which is the easiest for us to relate to His Holiness and relate to the Tibetan culture and so forth, and in a very authentic way, is Freedom in Exile. Freedom in Exile. And then alongside My Land and My People, this is also another book which you can read along the Freedom in Exile. And as for the Buddhism, now that we see that and perhaps it is because of His Holiness's influence, His Holiness's constant advice given to the Tibetan people and the youngsters, or to anybody, to be well informed of your own culture, particularly the Nalanda tradition, Buddhist tradition. For that matter, yes, there are several books there which are extremely authentic, and simply because there's a book there by any author, it doesn't mean that the book is very the authoritative pertaining to the Buddhist philosophy, psychology, and so forth. So I always advise people to read the books by His Holiness the Dalai Lama, to get the authentic, original concepts of the Buddhist philosophy and psychology. For that matter, one book that I may suggest is World of Tibetan Buddhism by His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And then for the introductory part, or into the introductory reading, Kindness, Clarity, and Insight. And then for more sophisticated readings, The Practice of Wisdom by His Holiness, and also for particularly related to compassion, the Transforming the Mind. There's one book, not really a huge book, it's a small book. Transforming the Mind is a commentary on the 8 verses of mind training. And for information, if you want to really get the broad picture of Buddhism in a more succinct and also in more detail, I would recommend the series of books which are co-authored. It was actually reflections of His Holiness's teaching. This actually is the outcome of the teachings of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and which were all compiled by Western nun, Venerable Tibetan Children. And so all these series of books, they come as authors, His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Venerable Tibetan Children. If you can just go there, visit it. So those books would be very helpful. In fact, I worked on these series for about for a long time to edit those books. Office of His Holiness the Dalai Lama sent me there to America to work with Venerable Chudrenla to edit these. So yeah, these books are very helpful. And then alongside, since that nowadays there is this trend is being, we see that this trend is being picked up quite encouragingly by the Tibetans, reading books on Tibetan Buddhism. We see that there are many books nowadays authored by divergent the authors. It's simply, I'm reiterating this, that simply because it's a book, it doesn't mean that it's authoritative. This is an authority in the Buddhist philosophy. Nowadays, there are many people who write books very easily, just without very, very naive understanding Buddhism, and they become authors. So I would highly recommend anybody who's interested now, particularly developing a new habit of reading books on Tibetan Buddhism, I would encourage you to read the very standard and authoritative books. Okay, so in this connection, there's one author alongside His Holiness, that I may suggest is the Most Venerable Geshe Sonam Rinchen. His books, they're really classic, they're really good. And although these are all his teachings transcribed, but the one who transcribed and one who translated and edited, it was all done by Ruth Sonam, his translator and editor. And she's extremely, her English command, his command of the English is just excellent, number one, and knowledge of the Dharma, knowledge of the Buddhism is so good. So the books by the Most Venerable Geshe Sonam Rinchen, they are very, very reliable, and I would highly recommend reading those books. Okay, so with this in mind, and I say the reading books, making a habit of reading these good books would be extremely beneficial for oneself, of course, no need to say this. At the same time, the point is that nowadays, because of this technology, very sophisticated technology, and year by year it's been more and more sophisticated, and then our mind is totally sucked up by the technology, all these gadgets that we don't really, if we're not being careful, if not being wise, we will totally be intoxicated by these gadgets, and that we go after the Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, WhatsApp, whatnot. There are so many of those things, and then your mind has simply been intoxicated by this, and then in the end, you wake up, you already today you may be 20, when you wake up, it's already like 40, 50, 20 years so easily will pass by, and then you regret that, what did I do? You go to the treasure island and you come back empty-handed. So this is a potential danger that can happen to the new generation. So therefore, this life is so precious, and I would highly recommend that, of course, to catch up with the world. But all these things like the Twitter, the Instagram, the Facebook, just going out to Facebook, one of the other, in the end, there's nothing to catch up actually. So what I would say is that just know that these things are happening, and then meanwhile, I would suggest to allocate more of your time for reading really concrete, helpful books. So that would make sure that your knowledge is increased, and particularly books by His Holiness the Dalai Lama, the compassion will be increased. So these two things are the two wings of your life, where this knowledge will make sure that you become very confident. You don't have to feel any a sense of inferiority amidst other people, number one, and your compassion. This will help you to make your life very easy and peaceful, happy, and very productive. Your life will turn out to be very productive. So these two things, we should be kind to ourselves, and we should be wisely kind to ourselves in ways to make sure that this life does not go waste. And I'm saying it again, and if somebody's listening to this and you are age 20, you may think, oh, I still have another 20, 30, 40, 50 years. So it'll not, it's in my hand. No, you may think that is in my hand, but if you get sucked up, if you're not being wise, if you flow in the trend of the world of the technology and the digital world, then suddenly you'll realize that, okay, where am I? And you realize that already the white hairs coming here, there, and so forth, and finished, and you'll regret. So be wise, be kind to yourself, and be wisely kind to yourself. Be wisely kind to yourself, meaning that don't be fooled, deceived, sucked up by the gadgets, and instead they make sure that you grow yourself in your knowledge and in your compassion by reading the books, particularly by His Holiness the Dalai Lama. This will guarantee that out of 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, you grow to a very different person, very mature, civilized culture, and very productive the citizen of the world, and very, I say, a person, a Tibetan, who is a pride of all the Tibetans. Okay, and alongside, I also request that each one of us, we let us take the initiative to remind our youngsters, younger generations, that the not to be sucked up by the digital world. And with this digital world, of course, there are so many good things, bad things. It's like ocean. Ocean has so many beautiful fish, beautiful lotus and so forth there, but the very scary animals also there. So we should be wise in picking up the good things, and particularly what you find nowadays in the Twitters, on the Instagram, Facebook, and so forth. Yes, you can be there just maybe a part of your time, but major part of your time, I would suggest you let us do it, and let us encourage our younger generations to also do the same thing, so that the world, as envisioned by His Holiness the Dalai Lama, will see a better world, more healthy world, more harmonious world, more meaningful world tomorrow. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you.